Welcome to Brother Owl's Garden. I'm Brian, and I'm so glad to see you here today with a wonderful guest that I'm delighted to be hosting, coming to us from Maine in the United States. He has a degree as a Master of Divinity with a focus in mysticism. He has had a near-death experience, not once, but twice. So beat that. He is an action in the world. He is a contemplative practitioner. He's a former television show writer and host. He is ex-clergy in the United Church of Christ. He's a counselor. He's a storyteller, a raconteur, and a scholar. And what's more, he's a friend of chipmunks, which means he's a good guy in my book. And before I forget, he is also an international best-selling author who is having one of his books right now made into a movie. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my great honor to welcome to the platform today, Peter Panagore. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you for having me, and hello, everyone. Thanks, Brian.
Well, it is a great honor, and I really thank you for accepting the invitation so graciously and readily, and I thank you preemptively for all that will be shared in this conversation. Thank you, Peter. Before we get started with, I have a lot of questions for you. This is a fascinating topic for me. They call them NDEs, near-death experience, but in my opinion, they should be called RFDs, return from death, because you didn't have a near death, you had an actual death, but you returned here from it. So I just want to put that out there that maybe we should call them RFDs. What do you think about that?
Funny you should be saying that, because I have often thought about it as a death experience. For me, from my point of view, it's a death experience. Return from death experience has a more accurate meaning, I think, for the people who haven't had one. And there is a difference between knowing death and not knowing death, and that's why we're all so different. We're like a collective community of people who are have seen something. Now there's tens of millions of us because of cardiac care, but we know our consciousness. We know our consciousness is not attached to our body. There's no speculation or belief about this. This is not a belief thing. It is a mark that happens to a person that's left on your consciousness, that shifts perspective, that's irrefutable and never, ever goes away.
Absolutely, right. Absolutely. And yeah, of course, return from death would be from the subjective perspective.
Yeah, it's a good idea. I like it.
It goes from here. But then again, so is the word death, in the sense that we infer that it means a finality and ending. Even that is also a subjective perspective view on the word.
It is, even in the experience of it. Even right. My death is different than everybody else's death. Everybody has their own experience. So that it totally expands with what you just said.
Yeah. Well, Peter and I had a little introductory chat, because we hadn't met before this, before we began recording our conversation. And just several hours ago, a very, very inexpressibly beloved aunt of mine transitioned on. And as we speak, she is experiencing her experience of ineffable bliss as we speak. And, I was just having a call with my mom about it. Of course, there's the, on our side, we call that death. We grieve and mourn to an extent, or, depending on the situations on this side. But just to reaffirm the absolute reality that the person who we call deceased, who we say has died, you can be sure is having a very different experience, having transitioned than we might be experiencing from having them moved on from this side, so to speak.
People think, sometimes people believe that near-death experiencers might not experience grief or mourning. but we do. One of my best friends died 2 weeks ago, and on a mountain bike while he was doing what he loved, and I grieve for him. And so even though I know when my dad died, I grieved for him. He died 2 years ago, year and a half ago. I grieve for him,
Yeah.
even though in my near-death experience itself, I saw his death. I saw where he went. He was with me in a way, and so I know his well-being. I know his well-being in the center of my heart. I see it. He came back to me after he died and showed me himself, and the but I still grieve. And so the suffering and pain here is a very bonding, communal experience of humanity, no matter who we are.
Yeah, I think that what you've just described is simply human. And, we are being human. At this point, we are incarnate, subjective emanations, individuated, bundle of feelings and thoughts and all this kind of stuff. And I'm kind of turned off by uh tends to come from maybe religious figures. Oh well, I have transcended that bothersome human trait of grieving because I just have a matter of fact uh, understanding of how things work. Well, Adi Shankara grieved his mother's passing. He promised her repeatedly that he would be at her side at the time of her death, and he was not able to get back to her. And he was crushed by this. And he was Adi Shankara, the first teacher, so to speak. He is a indescribably luminous soul, but he grieved because it's just part of what being a human is. And even though I can intellectualize, right now, my beloved aunt, who was one of the most beautiful people you could ever meet. And that's not a post-death euphemism. That is a factual description of her. I could say, well, now she's in bliss. But you know what? We cried. I cried with my mom who lost her younger sister.
Yes,
And
of
there
course.
is something to be said for, I don't want to present this the wrong way, but the most beautiful of beauties that I have ever observed seem to have a core of pain to them, if that makes sense. There's a
One of the things I rarely talk about as a result, an after effect of my major NDE. I died, just so people know, I died ice climbing in 1980, and I had what is called a union experience, and it had a long-lasting impact on me, changing me completely. And one day, I was in downward dog breathing from the ball of my feet up my spine and into my crown and back and forth as part of my Kriya practice, and was holding the posture for a long time when I was taken out of my forehead, out of my body, and brought inside this angelic envelopment like being that who's been part of my life since I was a child, who carried me in my first near-death experience, and who I had met previously, carried me into a heaven where I saw the unlimited, and I saw my limited nature as a human created, the differentiation between them. And I was protected. I was a light being in the shape of a human with sort of some materialism to me.
Mhm.
But I knew I was safe inside this angelic room bubble, but the power of the unlimited was awful, 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 fearful and wondrous, magnificent and overpowering. And the differentiation of seeing myself created a sort of suffering in me in this experience. So in this experience of bliss, I had the powerful sense of my physical lower nature. It was it's offset by what happened to me when I was in my near-death experience, where I saw the core of my being as a created center, like a photon of light superpositioned between myself outside as the limited and the purest self I am before being in the becoming the awareness itself of a septillion photons, a field of photons that extends infinitely up, down, left, and right. But I am outside of it and superpositioned in it. I am connected to it, even though I am outside of it. And so these two polar paradoxes of our inner core, of our light that is the original self, way beyond the layers that we experience
Sure.
here, and the layer here where we're suffering. I call this place a beautiful hellscape because and I find that I like living my life. I'm having fun. That wasn't always true after my NDE, but it is now. But the suffering is what creates my drive to return to the state of oneness. It is my motivator. It's my energy. It's the power of brokenness and suffering can propel a person into bitterness and darkness at an extreme, or it can propel a person into the end of self on the other end of the spectrum. And at the other end of the spectrum, a door opens. And when not aimed at recrimination against creator, when aimed at surrender, the bliss of heaven comes to dwell within me and gives me a strength and courage to live the suffering and my grief, as I described about my friend and my dad, as you experienced with your aunt and your mom's grief. You had this grief with your mom. We share grief. We share grief with each other. And we cry these human tears because we're human beings, and it releases for us. You've probably been in a funeral setting where everybody's crying and everyone's releasing. And everybody who's the recent death, they're also grieving all the deaths that they've ever had in their lives. So it's this human release of suffering, but it's also love. People are mourning together because they love. You grieve because you love. And all of this is tied back to the core of the all love, of the love that is all that there is. And people ask, why is there suffering? Because the whole place is built that way, and not just you and me, the whole universe, everything in it. And I saw this when I was dead too, that everything consumes something else. It couldn't exist if that didn't happen. Not here anyway.
Peter, you say we grieve because we love. Absolutely true. And it reminds me of something that my dear brother Bob out in Hawaii and I have discussed since sometime in the 90s. In his own words, the price of great love is great pain. Now, there's some that would like to recoil from that and say, no, it doesn't have to be. No, that's wrong. There's no hurt necessary. What I'm saying is, if you love truly and powerfully, you are vulnerable because of caring. And when you care, if something painful or suffering or some tribulation occurs with someone that you love deeply, you feel it because you care. So we grieve because we love, and we feel because we care. And it's not wrong. It's not something that needs to be intellectually triumphed over. It's something that needs to be allowed to ripple through us and run its course. Not to an excessive point, but let it be, and it just, I think that sums it up. The price of great love is great pain. If you love, you will hurt because of it. Love anyway, of course. So,
It's the
um,
treasure of heaven.
yeah,
Love is the treasure of heaven.
and pain seems to be the greatest or most effective teacher. Uh, we really pay attention to pain. We
Mm,
might dismiss or
mm,
delay or blow off things, other things, but
but
boy, do we pay attention to pain. Pain is a great teacher. So if in the midst of our pain, we can see it as a teacher and glean from it the precious gems that it offers, if we're able to see past the suffering of it, the agony of it, it is a great teacher.
so how do you look past the suffering of it?
To detach self from it to an adequate degree that you are not seeing it as you, and not seeing it as taking it personally, and not seeing it as identify something you identify with, but observing that there is pain. That would be the answer I would give, but you're about to give us a much better one.
No, what you're saying is the result of practice. And the result of the strange thing about mysticism is that it comes in a bunch of different forms. And one of the forms it comes in is the practice of centering.
Mhm.
And there are many techniques of centering throughout the world over many centuries from many cultures. And what they all seem to have in common is mental focus and breath. Some have movement and breath. So some combination of those things. And they all have surrender at their core.
Mhm.
And instead of trying to wish away my grief or my attachment to my suffering, I go instead to polish the inner eye, wherein, as Meister Eckhart wrote, where the eye wherein I see God, God sees me. I polish that lens and look there, and then what happens is I have this ongoing exposure to moments of the now, which creates a pile of now nuggets in my soul, breath by breath accumulation, which presses against myself, which expands this presence inside me. And so when I grieve and my mind runs wild with even a song, like this morning, I've got a song in my head I heard yesterday, and I haven't worked yet to remove it. But the technique to remove the thought is always breath and focus, and you become what you think. The Buddha was 100% correct when he said, we become what we think. And what I want to become is my beloved's one and only. And I know that my beloved loves everyone equally, because that is the nature of the divine. There's no, when I was dead, I found the particularity of my own most beloved child of the divine in this infinite love that extends not just through our universe, but all of heaven and all the universes, aimed at my soul of specialness. But the same energy of the divine love was aimed at the souls of every human being on earth I could see. 7 billion people, right at the very core of their being. To be a particularly beloved person of the divine is to be the divine itself, which is what we are. And so my desire to surrender aims at becoming at my beloved. And from that place, all this, there's like this cascade of impact in life, including grief. I still grieve. But the more I live in this place of heaven within, I am able to retreat there for my own healing as I need.
Mm, mm. I love that. And you reminded me what a very, very, very close and dear friend of mine. He's a Trappist monk. He told me one time he had to put on his civilian clothes and he was sent. He's actually in Massachusetts, and he was
Spencer?
yes,
Oh,
yes,
we could talk about Spencer Abbey, but keep
yes.
talking.
I have a profound connection there. And
As do I.
okay, do you happen to know Father Emmanuel Morinelli? The
No, I knew Father Thomas Keating and Father
okay.
Theophane Boyd.
Hmm. I
Theophane
went
was my spiritual advisor.
I went to see Father Keating before he died, but unfortunately, infirmary laws, they were not allowing anyone to get near him. So uh, I was doing a retreat there, and I was able to I stayed in the guest house. That
I've
was a
been
real
there.
honor. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So
That's
you
very
were telling a story though. Plus, one before you go back to your story, I went to high school, Catholic high school near Worcester and near Spencer, and in the senior year of my senior year, the back in '77, the religion teacher learned contemplative meditation, which was rooted in Theravedic Buddhism from Jack Kornfield and
okay.
Meister Eckhart and Teresa of Avila, and I that's where I began my entire interior contemplative life was through that monastery.
Okay. We just this is you. Please come
It's a
back
bit
many.
much.
Yeah, please come back many times because I'll let our viewers know in our brief pre-conversation chat, just to get acquainted a little bit. We could each uh, we could each perceive there are universes of overlap between us, and we have so much to share and exchange and back and forth. And so, uh, I hope you'll come back already. We're not even halfway through the interview or the
Yeah, count me in,
conversation.
count me in.
Yeah.
So
So,
you were
but
telling a story about this monk.
well, Father Emmanuel told me that one time he was, it used to be almost unheard of. The Cistercians are, you could argue they are the strictest of all monastic rule. You could easily argue that. And so they were never even allowed to have contact with family 50, 60 years ago. Things are loosened up a lot since then, which is how I'm able to know him. Otherwise, I never could. But he told me one time he was sent down to DC for some business with the monastery, something yada yada, and he didn't wear his habit or any, the robe, anything like that. He just put on civilian clothes. But before the trip, some of the other brothers in the cloister were saying to him like, "Oh, you're going out, you're going to the outside, and are you scared? Are you worried? Well, what, the world, you're going out into the world with its temptations." And he said, "No, because I bring the cloister with me in my heart." And what he was exemplifying there is it's one thing for the monk to be in the cloister, it's another thing for the cloister to be in the monk. And I can paraphrase St. Francis of Assisi. Um, a virtuous man is not truly virtuous if he cannot remain virtuous amidst the wicked. And it's not to say that all the world is evil, but the point is, if
Right,
if
right,
if you
right, right.
if you ain't got it inside you, you ain't got it. You can go to
And
the temple, you can go to the mosque, you can go to the cathedral, but if that holiness and that sanctity and centeredness is not ignited and alight within you, you know, it's kind of temporary and fleeting. Not really there.
which is what we find in the Gospel of Thomas. And
My
actually,
favorite.
when you strip away the theology from the four Gospels, that's what you find there too.
Yeah.
But it's so layered over with atonement salvation
Yeah.
that it's impossible to see the singular teaching of Jesus when he talked about make your eyes single and your body will be filled with light. Go
Mm,
into your cloister and pray.
mm.
It's in the we could talk about that, all that stuff too. I mean, I
Well,
don't know if
it's
people are
just
interested in all that. That's it's kind of spiritual geekism. I'm totally a mystical
well,
spiritual geek.
bring it on because it takes a whole lot for me to get tired of it. I'll let you know if I ever get to that point. But again, you just mentioned the Gospel of Thomas, happens to be my favorite of all Gospels, yanked out of the Bible. And the reason why I absolutely love it is because the Gospel of Thomas Didymus the twin has no Thomas Didymus the twin in it. There's none of him in it. He simply is an absent presenter of the refined nugget of what the Christ offered. He didn't put himself in it. It's not filtered through him. There's no him in it. It's Christ said this, Christ said that, Christ said this, Christ said that. And some of them are somewhat enigmatic, certainly for someone new to it, somewhat enigmatic. And there's a definite overlap in similarity with some of the foundational teachings within Buddhism as well. That overlap.
Sure.
Yeah,
And in the
definitely.
and in the Upanishads and
Yeah,
in the Vedas
yeah,
and elsewhere as well.
yeah,
Lao Tzu,
yeah,
Rumi,
yeah,
Kafir, Hafez.
yeah. How many variations and versions and perspectives of truth can we name? And the reason why they share that overlap is because they're truth. You know, it's not that it validates one religion or affirms another theology or ideology. It's because truth kind of does that. It shows up in lots of, kaleidoscoping, overlapping traditions or ideologies.
Because as we began, the mystical experience, we were talking about NDE experiences that are all different from each other,
Mm,
because every mystical experience is the state of union, has their own experience. And not only that, they come back into their body, which is in the cultural, the DNA, their advantages and disadvantages, their cultural context, their language, and they can only speak in metaphor because every experience is ineffable. And so that they use that's the universal language is metaphor, simile, myth, and symbol.
yeah,
That's it.
the language of the unconscious and the language of that which cannot actually be expressed. It can only be alluded to, maybe at best. And we're making our best effort within this context to offer that. But Peter, you're racing me ahead to the second to last question that I have prepared that I want
Okay.
to ask you. And I'm just going to ask you, not in
Okay.
the order I wrote them. What would you say to the notion that everyone's experience after the physical death of their body, the departure into the beyond, is that is actually a subjective projection of their own consciousness or even unconscious, as opposed to being that there exists one single absolute reality and experience of it. In other
I
words, that
think that
the individualization of us determines the experience of the oneness.
yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
The every mystical experience as being shown in the historic record that's being created now on YouTube and in books and in articles where people are telling their stories and they're being recorded and stuck into the historical record are showing that everybody's experience is subjective. Now, sometimes those experiences, like the Buddhist who sees Jesus, okay, no cultural context for that, no explanation for that, but those kind of things do happen. However, as far as I know, so far from what I understand, and I like hedging my bets here, is that I can speak from my own experience. My experience in my first NDE was culturally expressive.
Mm-hmm.
I went to a hell, not everybody does. I
Mm-hmm.
experienced shame, not everybody does. I was infilled with the oneness of being and expanded into bliss, paradise, awe, knowledge, understanding. I inflated to a point at which, when I was the singular point superpositioned with the field of photons, I was seeing that, but I was also inside of that. And inside of this, I came to the edge of what I would call annihilation of my separate, limited self to be enfolded back into the oneness of being. So there is this oneness itself. But paradoxically, So there's this one expanded photon of myself, and then there's this long tail of my everlasting soul that's sort of a lower level down. But inside this lower level down, I'm living all my incarnations. And my lower level down is like a huge loaf of bread in which there are spears, little tiny like kebab spears, and each of these kebab spears are individual lives, but none of them are me.
Mm.
There's a sequence to them because I see this order, but they're all at once for me. And then there's at the very end of the loaf is the life I just lived. And in that life I just lived, when I went through a hell of my own making.
Hmm.
I made my own karma. I experienced the pain from the other people by being in them, but I was in them because of the divine in them, because of the divine that I am. I experienced their suffering. So all of that is background. Um, I think, and this is thinking, this is not knowing, this is analysis. And so as I look at this as systematically as I can, with a dispassionate eye of a scholar, I see that a pattern is that people carry into their lower level of their experience, that they get to carry back a culturally contextualized experience because of two things. My understanding of what happened to me, my expression of what happened to me is culturally contextual. So whatever I say about it, and I have a lot to say about it, is framed in the language of my culture. And I made an intention to get my master's degree in mysticism and theology, but mysticism, in order to contextualize it for myself. And so my self-contextualization of this as I express it is well, it's Christian contextualization with a smattering of Eastern thought,
Sure.
right?
We'll call
And
that
so
Merton-esque.
Merton-esque, yeah, Merton-esque, and who's one of my heroes. So there is this level, there's all these levels. There's the level of humanity living in the world. There's the level of we bring back our experience from the other side. One of the things that can't be ever brought back from the other side is an expression and an understanding of the full oneness of being. When people have a Kundalini awakening to the extent where the self vanishes, and I don't mean like you can't be there when it happens. If you are there when it happens, then you're not there. And so that's like this extreme end. And in between those extreme ends, where there is no self and there is self, there are layers of soul. So in my mystical experiences subsequent to my NDE and my second NDE, this is a very big subject, but there are layers of soul. I was carried into them. I told you about this downward dog thing, and there's a series of these things that happen in my life. And in this particular event, I was carried inside this angelic entity that rips me from myself. And I went through layer after layer after layer. And in each layer, in each heaven, I thought this was the ultimate bliss of all being, until I got to the next level when a layer was peeled from me. And I was moving rather rapidly through these layers of heaven, having these layers peeled from me, always thinking this has got to be it. But it was always further on. And I could see, like, it was this strange experience of seeing the light itself. And the closer I got to the light, the further it seemed to recede from me because of the multiple layers that were peeling off of me. All of this said means
Fractals.
that the human experience and the near-death experience is a low level of heaven, and that the closer we get to the divine, on this progressive journey. I am still interiorly traveling toward the light. I've been up to the edge of the light. I've been in the light, but I am simultaneously on this layer, this stripping away journey as I am in my human form. And it is an eternal surrender of self to be reunionized with the all love. And so everyone has their own experience here because we're all our own people. And so because it's so subjective here, it is, language has gotten in the way, ideologies, theologies. But if we understand that all mystics, all people who have mystical experiences, and it's not just the people in the books, it's you and me, we're common folk. Lots of common folk have mystical experiences. They get a visitation of the dead, for instance, for example. Everyone who has that kind of experience has their own individual experience that they can never really talk about. If you not really talk about it, it's my brother came to see me and he told me that I am loved. Could be a Hallmark card. It's that flat compared to the experience itself. And so the only way that we really have to talk about it is through divine energy. And the divine energy that's shared between people is actually the message of that I am here, one among 10 million near-death experiencers, to be in the world. I am done.
Yeah, I never realized that there were that many. That's probably a ballpark figure too. When you were talking about going through degrees or layers of the bliss and the heavenly perfection, etc., and it's like spiritual hypergamy. I I was thinking of, in the Buddhist teachings, the 31 planes of reality and all that. That might be a Buddhist way of looking at that. And one of the threats that they say is, at a certain level of these planes, you are a god. Small g, you are a god, and the threat to living in that level of paradise is that it is so comfortable and wonderful that you kind of put aside your own continued evolution, so to speak, and you might downgrade in your next incarnation, which would be, eons later. But you mentioned earlier, Peter, and I hope it's okay to ask you this. The thing, and I'm going to ask you to give us a bullet point or thumbnail view of your NDEs. We might have started with that, but as the flow goes, we didn't start with that, and it's all fine. But I wanted to ask you a little bit of a personal question, if you don't mind. You mentioned about the emotions and things that you were feeling during the NDE or the NDEs, both of them. I don't know if either or both, one or the other. And you mentioned you went to a hell, etc., of your own making. I very much appreciate that you included that, because that's what I was wondering. You mentioned shame. This is the kind of thing that, oh, I don't want to talk about that. It's all cotton candy unicorns and fuzzy wuzzy, warm marshmallowy stuff. Well, maybe it's not. Is it okay if I ask you about the shame that you mentioned briefly that you experienced? Could you elaborate on that?
Sure, I'd actually like to. Thank you. Let's begin here on earth and say that guilt is a feeling for something that you've done, and shame is a feeling for something that you are.
Mm.
And so when guilt gets internalized, it becomes a shame of who we are. And that's a very human experience. And people don't talk about shame. And the only way to talk about shame is to admit your own shame so you can meet the person where they are.
Mhm.
An after effect of near-death experience is, for me, the understanding of my own brokenness, my own humanity, my own shame, so that I see the same in others and welcome it to myself. And in that welcoming it to myself, we experience a healing of psychology. I came back knowing my shortcomings. I came back as a different person, but to the same body. And my impetuous nature has gotten me into trouble many times and still does. And I can be frightening to people in my capacity for speed. I ride my bicycle fast. I ski fast. I'm blessed with a high level of sense of space. And I always respect pedestrians and dogs. I always slow down. I don't care where I am. I'm the same on the ski slopes. I always slow down, but sometimes once in a while I make a mistake and I don't slow down at the right second. And my high speed frightens somebody who then has an emotional reaction unintended by me. And they become angry, and I am ashamed that I have hurt them because I've internalized my own. I understand my ADHD and my need for being in the flow. I know myself well enough that I know how I should always pay attention, but sometimes I don't. And so I have this equality I have with people that came back with me to understand. In understanding my own human broken nature, I understand theirs as well. And that came because I died. And when I was dead, I went through a hell of my own making where I suffered all of the pain that I had given into the world through my actions. And through my mental decision-making process and my emotions. And I experienced it from my own inside. I saw my ideas and my emotions and the size of the pain that I was giving. And then I saw it all from the inside of every single other person. I was that other person. I became all of these other people in the sequence of moments and experienced their response, which was simultaneous to my being in this other superpositioned. I was in two places at once. And I saw the pain that I gave away was disproportionate by tenfold to the pain I thought I was giving. And all of that pain accrued to me, the giver. I was shown there was no part of me that was hidden from the divine light of eye of light that could see and had already experienced with me every single moment of my life and experienced with everyone who I hurt every single moment of their life. I was shown their pain, and I saw myself in comparison to the infinite power and wisdom and knowledge and goodness and love and kindness and compassion of the divine. And I was ashamed for my smallness. And in my smallness of my shame, I was shown the smallness of all humanity. I saw that all of the things for which I had shame, the things that I had done, was the same as everybody else, that we were all small together. And it created this radical equality in me of understanding of my smallness and the universe's smallness compared to the unlimited nature of the whole love, bliss, truth, knowledge, power, might, being of the divine who was speaking in me as I went through this. I love you as you are. I have always known you as I know everyone. I experienced this with you, everything you did. I loved you as you did these things. I love you now with this immeasurable love I have always loved you with, as I love all people in the same degree, and accept my love. And it wasn't the words weren't accept my love. There were no words. It was the power of the size of the love that was available to me made me take my eye off myself and place it on the divine. And when I did that, I expanded into the oneness of being and saw my origin. And so shame is this thing that helps us empathize with the full humanity of everyone else. And as I live my life, I make mistakes. And because I'm human, I have hurt people in my life. I probably will until the day I die. I use my shame. I don't have to use it. It just is for me. What is for me is that I see the more clearly I aim my inner eye at the divine being and infill myself with this expansion in this life, the more clearly the light in me sees the light in you, which is this energy exchange. The light sees itself and it's experiential. And in that space, as I see my own brokenness as a human being, as I witness having lost enough of myself to become witness every day of my own life to my life since the day I came back, to hone that so that I see first the light in the other, or as soon as I can, the light in the other, and then accept their brokenness, their own shame. And then there is this healing for them as well as me. And it's all because I've backfooted myself into heaven. I weight my back foot. That's where my foot is. And then I keep my worldly foot light and like fire, just tapping here, tapping there. The more I weight myself back into heaven, the better my footing is here.
Wow. Thank you personally and also on behalf of the viewers for the pithiness, meaningfulness, practicality, usefulness, and wisdom of that whole bit you just shared with us. And I especially appreciate because it was so very personal. What I gather is that you experienced, in experiencing the feelings of the people that you had hurt in some way or another, the immediate response was shame, but yet at the arising of the indescribable and unearnable and unconditional and impartial and immeasurable and eternal divine love that was granted to you by our Creator, your attention moved from your trespasses, your wrongdoings, your woundings. It 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 you changed your focus to God's love. And what I observed is that there was a shift from shame to humility.
That's it.
And so, what does the divine not touch that it is made perfect? So even in that garbage, that especially against the backdrop of heaven, pure love, the NDE experience of what the fullness of divinity and reality actually is, especially against that contrasting backdrop, does our filth reek. And yet, instead of dwelling in on it and hating yourself for it, the shame was transmuted into humility, which you have brought back, so to speak, back to this level of our existence. And it is now expressed by you as empathy, recognition. And I can't quote the exact words, but the Buddha said, don't condemn anyone else's flaws, because remember, so too did you do them all at one point in the past. Whatever you're seeing that's disgusting in that person or revolting in that person, okay, those things are yuck, but don't judge that person, don't condemn that person, because remember, you did it all too. Judge not lest ye be judged. And also another point, I think it was St. Paul, less me, more him. Less my concept of a separate self, small s, and that gradually eroding and dissolving and decreasing ever more. At the same time, the divinity that we arise from and that we are consubstantial with more and more. So it's a like this. That I saw that process in what you were describing. Peter, what do you say to people who are afraid of death? And that's a lot of people.
Always look on the bright side of life.
Do, 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 do.
um, so, uh,
Did you ever see
I
that video of the North Korean military marching to that song? You have to look it up on Google. I mean, on
I'll look
YouTube.
it up on Google.
Yeah,
I'll look
it
it up.
is hilarious. Just search North Korea bright side of life. You'll find it. Note
I
it.
will. I'll
Note it,
look it
people.
up.
It's hilarious. Yeah. So look on the bright side of life. Elaborate.
Well, that was just for comic effect, really,
Okay.
because in the midst of suffering, it's really difficult. And the greatest suffering of all, of course, is fear of death. As we started talking about, we talked about grief and mourning, and when we began our conversation, and now we're talking about why we grieve. We fear it's a cutting off. There's no finality in your life like when someone you is your beloved dies. There's no bringing him back. They might come and visit you, but there's no bringing him back. And your life has to go through a long period of readjustment, of living the new you in the new world you find yourself in, bereft. And so that finality and the darkness that precedes it, the darkness precedes it is that people who haven't died can't see what it is.
Sure.
It's not that they don't, it's that they can't. The veil is thick enough that it's impenetrable. And you got a whole religions built up around what is after death. And it's all rooted in the origin of the religion is always in a mystic who had an experience or series of experiences who tried to put it in myth and symbol and metaphor, and it gets created into
Yeah.
a way of thinking about what comes next. But people, those are all ideas. And ideas are, people are asked to believe in those ideas because it gives them courage and strength and hope, but they're just ideas. And so ideas can only cover over the fears so much. And when you come to the moment of death, which I've been as a pastor, I was a specialist in my town. So I was an unusual pastor, as you might guess. I kept my NDE a secret. Nobody knew in my town. I wasn't just in any church I was in, but I'm thinking about the town I live in now. And every church I was ever in, I was the community pastor on purpose. I wasn't just the local pastor. Anybody who had nowhere else to go came to me for funerals, or to mourning, or to pre-death, or to, I was available to everybody for that one thing. And I was never an evangelist. That's why everybody invited me in, because I never tried to convert, because I don't give a shit
Yeah.
about belief. And
Yeah.
so I attended a lot of dying, and a lot of people were afraid of dying. And I, more so than to tell them to have hope, which I did plenty of times, I try to help them to see. I tried to help them to feel. I tried to help them to have a taste of what I carried in me without ever naming it, just to be with them. And that if you have this connectivity inside yourself, if you cultivate a connectivity to that which you cannot name inside yourself, you'll find relief as you near your death,
Mhm.
because you'll be able to have a passing or deep acquaintance with your destination, even if you don't know what it is. I don't fear dying. I have, I mourn and I grieve, but I prayed for my own death for 20 years every day until I died again in 2015. I died twice, one in 1980 and one in 2015. And that ended I chose to come back a second time. And that ended my constant prayer for my death. Now I'm like, how much time do I have here? What's my sentence? Um, and I, on the day of my second death, I was like, oh my God, how did I not know that I woke up today? It's my birthday. I get to go home. And I can't give that to people. I can't give that to people. I can't. But what I can do I'm sorry. What I can do is tell them that the moment that they awaken, they will find the peace that they have always sought. And as you die, look for the light. Go with your relatives. Join the light as soon as you can. And you will find what 10 million near-death experiencers are saying these days.
Peter, a quick question about the light that I had not planned on asking, but you made me think of it. I can't remember the guy's name. Lear, maybe Lear. What do you say to the people that say it's a trap? Don't go for the
I
light.
say
It's a
they've never
recycling
had a new,
soul
yeah,
trap.
yeah,
Don't.
nah,
Yeah,
they
let's
have
hear
no
it.
idea. They've never been there. They don't know. And
Seriously.
they've never been there. They don't know. And
Mhm.
if there's a deception going on, they have the same problem as everybody else. I'm sorry. I don't normally, um,
We don't do
even they
toxic
will,
positivity here. You can speak freely.
in the moment of their death, they will see for themselves.
Yeah.
And so I have no fear for anyone. I have no fear for anyone.
Mhm.
And that includes those who believe those people,
Right.
because the light is, if you have a photon of light inside you, a single photon of light inside you. I don't even know if the human eye can see a single photon. I don't know. You'll see the light, you'll see the light, you'll see the light. And uh, I've been attacked by those people. I don't
Oh,
really care.
yeah.
I've been attacked by evangelicals. I don't really care. I've been
Okay.
attacked, so and I'm not concerned. I am unconcerned about the eternal salvation of anyone ever, because in the core of our being, in the core of everything there is, we are made of the beloved. And therein lies my confidence. Therein lies my conviction. I know who I am, and I know where I'm from, to whom I belong, and to where I return. And it's not a passing thing. The problem here for me is how I live in the world. It's not, it's The destination's already known. So all you need is love. If you're an atheist or you're fearful, don't you worry your pretty head, your handsome head. All you need to do is love the one you're with, to quote Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. Love the people who love you. That's the treasure. That's it. And everybody has this capacity. Even your enemies, even those in the Third Reich, still loved their family. And if you're going to condemn yourself, well, how do I phrase this? In condemning others, you condemn yourself.
Sure.
And so I'm not sure what more I can say.
Well,
Fear not, my friends.
that's kind of like one of the quotes from Confucius: "If you hate a man, examine yourself."
Yeah, it is.
There's something in that man or that woman that is being recognized that you haven't healed or resolved within you. And of course, you hate it in them, but you see it in them and are repulsed by it because on some level, it's in you. If somebody lodged an insult at you that was just absurd, you absolutely know that it is not true. You are not that. You go into laughter. It's absurd. You laugh. But if you see a quality or a characteristic in someone else that is, you know, ugly to you, then it might be because it's being reflected. It's reflecting something that's in you that you have yet to heal, so to speak. Um, and I got a wild and crazy one for you. What about the people that don't come back? And isn't it amazing how everyone that did quote unquote come back an NDE, they all had a revivable body, but you don't hear about many people that were decapitated or something coming back with an NDE story. So, am I over intellectualizing that notion, or is there something there? I mean, some people die with an unrevivable body. So, do you think there's a such thing as you still had more work to do, but this happened and now you're here, so we move along? Or,
Oh yeah.
everyone that's ever come back had a body that was miraculously or medically able to be revived. But what about those whose bodies were not? What happens then? Or is there a correlation? Or again, am I just thinking
That's an
too
interesting
much?
question. I every no one gets out of here alive.
Hmm.
Pretty Everybody dies,
Hmm.
and so ultimately everybody dies. The people who have revivable bodies, and they come back with a timeline that has been shifted because they've come back, or maybe the timeline stays the same if they're sent back. It's not your time, you go back, but then they're a different person. And so the timeline does shift with them because their perspective shifts, and everybody around them has to respond to their shift because you can't undo what's done. In my case, I chose to come back twice. I know my timeline shifted twice. In both cases, it was my time to die. Come home, we're waiting for you, was the message I got twice. Not, hey, son, this is not your train, don't get on. That's not what happened to me.
Hmm.
And so my body was revivable the second time. I had a heart attack. I was in an ambulance. And the first time, but I still chose to come back. I had already, as they administered the drug, I had already decided I'm sticking around because I could, because somebody needed me. And the first time I saw two timelines. I saw two timelines when I was dead. I saw my parents' timeline with me and my parents' timeline without me. And they were different. They lived different lives. But I was looking at the amount of suffering they were having. The amount of suffering without me was cataclysmic because it was the second child they would have lost.
Oh,
And the suffering
yeah.
with me was still suffering because you still get the same thing, the
Yeah.
same problem.
I can
But
totally relate to that, Peter. One of my most fervent prayers is that I outlive my parents. I do not want my parents to have the experience of me departing before they do. And after they do, no more requests. I'm fine with whatever, age I live to and whenever I go, but I do not want them to have to experience that. And I had a girlfriend who passed on, and I was very, very privy to the inexpressible agony of her parents. Her mother went into another mental zone of where is she? What is she home today? She just went into total blockage as a coping mechanism of the mind. And the father just went into, I I'll just have to use the word again, inexpressible grief. And I will not get into my experience of it in this episode, but what I will say, I'll just touch it and then I'm not going to get into it anymore. Uh, she came back to me and comforted me in a way that was indescribable. I went from an unspeakable hell of agony at receiving the news. And I would say that within an hour, she returned to me, and I was instantaneously pacified from, like flipping a switch, from
that's what happens.
unimaginable hell agony to a gurgling baby at its mother's breast that, like, I just cannot, again, can't adequately describe. But the things that you're sharing with me are wonderful. And let me throw another wild card at you. What about, because you said, you told us that it was not your experience that some being of light came and said, no, it's not your time, you need to go back. That wasn't your experience. You were given the option, the choice, and you chose to come back into your incarnate existence twice. What do you say? Because I have a friend that's big on this, and I'm curious your take. What do you say to the people who would say to such a light being, skedaddle? I don't have to listen to you. I chart my course here no matter what you say. I am a sovereign spiritual entity. I will do what I will do. There's no you telling me I need to go back. Because most stories with NDEs, you hear to some extent or another, you haven't finished your earth work. You need to jump back into your earth suit for a while. There's something more you need to do. Then it would be appropriate for you to depart. What do you say to the people that would, let's say, deny the being of light who tells them you need to go back, it's not your time?
Well, I've never heard of an NDE story like that. Nobody's
It's a
ever, maybe there's,
hypothetical, really. It's a
right.
hypo.
Well, let me,
You
that's
wouldn't.
my first point. Hold on. That's my first point. I've
Yeah,
never heard of a story like that. My second point is that you wouldn't hear of a story like that.
exactly.
And my third point is that that's hell.
That's a
And
powerful statement.
it's hell because of what you said before. You get to this point where you are a god, but you're not. You're not the fullness of the awakened one, of the awakening itself, of the ineffable. And so maybe there are entities like that. Probably, maybe there are. I don't know. I don't care. That's not my route.
Mm-hmm.
I saw the oneness of being, and I'm not one thing I'm not is I'm not a speculator about what is or isn't that I haven't experienced. I can analyze and think about it, but ultimately I only know what is, and what is the light itself, and the power and the strength and the overwhelming. I cannot describe. All right, so I could see inside of, I was inside of the infinite, I could see the infinite creating universes out of its infinity that I could not see from where light was pouring out of, that I could not see within. So there was a point I was inside of infinity, but there was a point of infinity that I could not see beyond. And that point, it was that point from which all things emanated. And that means everything, even the hypothetical beings you just described. Everything. There is no thing that is not this. There's nothing. Everything. The angelic beings that carry me, the demonic forms that harass me. There's no thing that is outside of this oneness, but there can be rejection of it.
Exactly. Yeah. For you have forsaken your wisdom for vanity.
And that's all about selflessness and selfishness.
Yeah.
And that's what we have in the problem of humanity isn't so much that we have nation against nation, is that we have selfishness in our DNA. That's what helps us survive.
Mhm.
It's because we're selfish. I'm going to eat that mastodon and you're not. And my
Mhm.
family's going to survive and my tribe's going to survive because we get that mastodon and
Mhm.
you don't get it. Maybe we feel bad for you, maybe we don't, but we're going to kill you to eat.
Yeah.
So, and that's survival, that's human. Understandably so, sadly.
And we hope that in coming months and years, society does not collapse to that primal reptilian me or you tribalism and survivalism with the way
It's
things
never
are
gone
going.
away though. It's never gone away. It's what every war we have in the world right now and threats of war are all about. Ultimately, it's all about the me and mine.
Yeah.
So I have a proposal. And my proposal is that for the first time in the history of humanity, there is something new under the sun. And the thing that's new under the sun is that medical science is raising the dead and has created a near-death experience phenomena estimated to be 10 to 20 million people in the United States. Multiply that around the world into all the nations where they have cardiac care, and understand that suddenly there is finally a new physical, like we can measure this thing, right? It has us, people are involved, and we are everywhere. We are in every culture, and so the more near-death experiencers are willing to speak up to people they love, confess the truth, because society represses and judges us and threatens us with insanity. I've had that threat in my own life. And so we have an opportunity now that we've never had as humanity before. And we're estimated to be somewhere around the size of the queer community in population. So we're like 4, 5, 6% of the population, somewhere in that neighborhood. That's a lot of people
Is that you're talking globally?
globally. And even in the United States, we're 4 to 5% measurably. And because there's a consistency of wherever cardiac care is at a higher level, there's a higher level of lives saved, or lives resuscitated is the word I'm looking for. And so the result of this is that we have an opportunity to nudge humanity. I don't think that we're going to build a utopian society. I know too much history. I know too much anthropology, geology. I like read all the time, science and history, and I suck that stuff up. And humanity has always been as it has been for hundreds of thousands of years. But the difference is now is that there are many of us who are theonauts. We've had death experiences. We're back, and we are unconvincible. Nobody's can change my mind.
Sure. Well, once you yourself have had a direct personal experience of the indescribable,
Yes.
you are quite beyond the intellectual and limited ruminations of people who, as you said before, haven't been there, haven't had that. You're speculating about what might be. I'm coming here telling you what I experienced is. Big difference. And
And it's what you experienced when when your girlfriend came back to you. It's
yeah,
the same energy.
yeah. And of course, as you mentioned, there's some of us that would be committed to an institution. I actually just watched an NDE about Bill Letson. Don't know if you happen to know who he is, but
I've heard the name actually.
yeah,
I have heard the name, yeah.
got hit by a car violently, died, had his NDE, came back, got up, said, "I'm fine. I don't know what you guys are all worried about." The police and rescue workers were saying, "Are you okay?" And he's, "Are you okay? I'm asking you if you guys are okay." And he was actually committed to a psychiatric ward for 10 days, 2 weeks for evaluations, because obviously you're nuts. Now, this is probably
Obviously.
back in this was in the late 1970s. So even then, there was a difference
Oh
in,
yeah.
shall we say, the spirit of the times than there is now. People are becoming more and more open to the fact that what we think we know has no bearing on the ultimate reality of what is. And what is true and what does exist does not have to fit into our understanding.
No, it doesn't. It can't.
Arrogant.
It can't. It can't. I came back, I came back with a minuscule of what I know. A minuscule. Mini, 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 mini. My brain cannot contain
Sure,
my soul.
sure.
It can't. My brain is contained inside my soul. Oh, we talk about inhabiting a body. Sorry, excuse me. I get something in my throat. Sorry.
That's okay. I think you're
We
going to
talk
go
about,
Celtic on me now.
well, maybe, we are not a human being having a spiritual experience. We're a spiritual being having a human experience.
C.S.
That my
Lewis.
consciousness is contained in my body, but that's not my experience now. That was certainly my experience when I came back. But when I was imprisoned inside of this thing, but also my experience when I came back immediately is that I also was bigger than this thing. So I was imprisoned
Yeah,
inside of
yeah,
it.
yeah.
But my body is actually inside myself, my soul.
Exactly, exactly. That is a more, well, should I say, the Celtic view of what soul is aligns much more with that. Not that, well, of course, English doesn't work. My soul is in my body. Already there's fraught with errors there. But for the sake of ease, the
Yeah,
soul, it's not that it's necessarily contained in your body like a little light glowing. Your body is in your soul. It's contained
but
within that.
it is also the little light though. It
Yeah.
is
Well, divinity in us as we are in divinity.
Yes,
There's
exactly.
the fractals, there's the Mandelbrot set that I was also thinking of when you talked about ascending into more and more high blissful layers. That's very fractal sounding to me. That
Mm.
might have gone on in infinity in both directions for all we know. I mean, very fractal to me when you were describing that. And so one of the blessings that I don't know, it just, you cultivate things, they come to you, and then you find the words to frame them in. May you abide in divinity as divinity abides in you,
Yeah,
you know.
indeed.
So yeah, the soul is in the body, is in the soul. I am the ocean in a drop in the ocean.
Exactly.
You know, fractals. I don't know how else to explain it. Now, and I've also wondered, here's a little humor. I've also wondered if when fishermen toss back a fish, does it swim back to its friends and talk about this otherworldly NDE that it had? I can't describe being out of the water. It was, just a little metaphor there.
Well, dolphins are like, they'd be like, no, man, no, 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 we breathe up there.
Yeah, yeah.
So if there'd be conversation. The seals would be like, those halibut, they don't,
I get you.
those who go between the worlds.
Yeah, it's just a matter of fact that depending on the level of our experience and consciousness and being, we can't.
Right. And the
necessarily
halibut's like,
relate.
no, man, you guys are wrong.
Yeah, 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 you're wrong. Or pity the poor goldfish in the bowl. Yeah.
Yeah.
So now that we've done everything sort of in a divinely almost backwards way, Peter, can you give us a thumbnail sketch of each of your NDE experiences? And then I also want to touch on your books.
So a thumbnail, some folks say, they ask, how long were you dead for? I don't know, minutes in the minutes in the human world. But my experience was expansive in the dead world, in heaven. So my thumbnail sketch is that I was ice climbing in Alberta, Canada, on the Icefields Parkway, and I made a mistake, and my mistake cascaded into hypothermia and death on the mountain. And it was March, and we were fighting our way down after my mistake, and I died of exposure. I froze to death, and I went through all the stages of hypothermia. And when I was dying, it's such an expansive experience. We talked a little bit about the hell. We talked a little bit about the union. We talked, okay. I at the end of near death, at the end of an ice, where am I in my story? And at the end of a life, dying from hypothermia, the final stage I went through was falling asleep. But I was trying to self-rescue. I still had the rope, and I was trying to self-rescue. It was stuck way up above. I was pulling on it. That's the self-rescue. And I fell asleep, and I would fall to where I was. I was on a ledge, and I was clipped into the mountain for the first time. So I was on a safety line that was permanently installed in the mountain about 100, 150 feet out. And I would collapse and smack my head and helmet and wake up and stand back up again. And then I stood back up again, and I had this tunnel vision that happened this last time. And as the tunnel vision closed, I thought I must be falling asleep, but this is really weird. I've never seen this before. And it went out, and I was conscious. I was like, I'm still awake. What's going on? And where's the mountain? And where am I? And in front of me, this dark expanse appears, and this dark expanse is ginormous. It's the size of the universe, but I can see that it's darkness, because way far in the distance, there's this little starlight appears, this tiny pinprick pop, and it pops into existence, and it rushes toward me across this the size of the universe distance, and it rushes toward me, and it communicates with me, to me, non-linguistically. I'm taking you. You're coming with me. And I'm like, hey man, I don't know what's going on here, but I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying right where I am. And as it rushed toward me, it filled my entire vision. The whole thing became light. And it's like, no, you're coming with me. And it grabbed me and took me. And I was enveloped inside of it like everything's metaphor. Okay. All of this is a construct of language. And I'm inside of this entity that is a being of light, that I know, because this is my being of light. This is the angel that I've met in my life, not seriously, but in series is what I meant to say, in series, since I was a child. And so I know where I am, and I'm inside this entity, and it's feeding me. It feeds me. It shows me its might. Its might is it's gigantic might. I have no power whatsoever. I've lost all of my autonomy, and I am inside of it, but I'm being fed compassion and comfort and well-being. And I know where I am, and I have no more a physical body. I have my light body, and my light body is a shape of a human, but there are no molecules to it, but I'm made of energy. And in this light body, I am able to see through the transparent entity into the void as we travel back up this elevator shaft that it had come down, and toward its place where it had come into being, into this void. And so I can see myself, and I can't even move. I don't want to move. And I see my life leave. I have an external point of view. I am bilocated. I have an eye that is seeing this happening. I'm seeing me inside going up for lack of another direction. But when I look from the inside over to see me seeing me, I can't see me seeing me. But I can only see from so I've got these 2 points of view, but in one of these points of view, I can't see the other me. And so there's this, I am a non-locus here. I am the divine eye seeing myself. I don't know how to describe this, because I still had a reduction. I wasn't the fullness of the divine eye. I was some portion thereof, as was this entity. This entity is also bilocated. It is an entity unto itself, but it is also the fullness of the divine. It's both simultaneously. It's like a drop in the ocean. It's water and the ocean. Only for me, it is the drop, but I see and sense and experience the expanse that lies beyond. And so we up this elevator, and we get to this edge, and at this edge, it unfolds itself into this larger space, and this larger space is an infinite space. I'm inside the infinite itself, and I am sort of birthed into this. And in this birth, my light self falls away, and I become this higher self. Now I am an expansive orb. So the containment of my light self is lost, and my light self becomes this much larger being that has no photons in it. I am just consciousness, and my consciousness is the whole of me. It's my thinking and my seeing and my hearing and my breathing, but I have none of those things because I'm not a human being, and I don't even have a brain. So I'm thinking really rapidly in the now, without a sequence of thoughts and without language, and I know myself. I know myself as this. This is me. This is always who I have been. This is me. And how did I think I was that other thing? But I'm inside of this. I am this orb in this infinity. And in this infinity, I can see in every direction at once. And it's vaster than the universe. It's universe upon universe upon universe in size. And I can see way far into it to a point. And at this point, there is darkness I cannot see within. But it's humongous. And I am alone in this place, but I am content with myself. And as I'm there seeing in every direction at once, this opening happens. It emerges from the darkness. It's like a rending of the darkness, and and this light pours through. But this light has it's alive in a way I can't describe. It is life itself. It is the purity of the origin of all life. It is living, and it comes toward me, and it's this waterfall, and it's this huge waterfall, and it's pouring down, and it's made up of all of the frequencies in the electromagnetic spectrum. And I can see the X-ray and infrared and the ultraviolet and all the colors and more. It's not just those. It is a septillion times more than that. And all of them are fragments, but simultaneous, and they're all colored because I can see them, but they're all also one thing. They're all also simultaneously white light. They are both at the same time, not like flickering this and that and the other thing. They're simultaneous, and it is the most beautiful, attractive, seductive, luscious desire of my soul I have ever experienced. And all I want is wanting it. I just want, and as I want it, it comes toward me, and in a thought, I move towards it. My wanting it is the thought of desire, which moves, which creates action for me. So just thinking it, I'm in motion toward it. It's in motion toward me, and the closer I get to it, the more I love it. I keep falling deeper and deeper into love until it comes right to my edge of my conscious orb self. And as it comes to me and I go to it, I reach to it with my being. And I should say before that happened, it had three levels to it. It was solid, it was translucent, and it was transparent all at once. And it led back into the infinite darkness. There was like a tunnel of darkness that led into the infinite itself. And as I touched it, it infilled me and inflated me, and it surrounded me. So I was immersed and I was inflated, and my self was this thinning layer of expanding like a balloon. And all these things happened at the same time. I heard my name called, my name of the origin of my photonic self that I mentioned, which was the same as being in this union expanded state where I was love and bliss and understanding and awe and paradise, beauty, joy, knowledge, creation, all of this happening at the same time. And the voice is speaking me into being, not just here, but all of my lives and my original photonic self and my expanded self, all of these timelines, all these times, all in this now, all at the same time. I'm in hell. I have the experience of hell, and what I told you before. And then I have this expansion to the point at which I thought I would annihilate and unfold into the oneness of the being. And at that point, I collapsed back down with a knowledge of my just lived life. And so now I know myself for who I am, and I can see, I didn't mention that I saw into other lives. When I saw all my other lives, I was brought into two of my lives to see from inside them. I can tell you what they are, but you can read them in the book, or if they're in the book, I don't remember.
Right.
So when I could see my recent life again, the voice that has no sound, that is all knowledge, that I wanted to, the instant I wanted to understand the formation of the universe and all of its levels, I did. And I could see I could see, sorry, there's a bunch of text coming in, I'm trying to get rid of them. I could see my parents suffering. And I was being welcomed into the divine being. Come home. This is me. This is you. It's time to be here. And I said, well, what about my parents suffering? And they're going to lose another kid. And as I said this, I was swept across this darkness, which was illuminated. It's also no thingness. There is no thingness to this. I am no thing. And I'm swept across this no thingness to this edge where there's like the Higgs boson field where energy becomes matter, and the divine's becoming the universe, and my consciousness is kind of tucked outside where I can see our entire universe, all of it. I can see the whole thing, and I can see the very beginning of it, where it is unfolding itself. The darkness is unfolding itself into light, and the light is creating all matter that is. And I see all of the galaxies, and I see like Indra's web woven inside of all that exists, this undergarment, underground of light and love that makes all things exist. And there's other universes, and these other universes are like popping into existence like a flower unfolding, boom, 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 one after the other. And all of this is simultaneous, and the voice that is the darkness itself is speaking through all of it like a megaphone in every single molecule of everything that there is. And it's saying to me, as it is saying to me inside the divine heaven that I was, and it was love saying, I love you now, in the way that I love you now. And all of the love and all of these universes and all of the matter, everything was pointed directly at me. This infinite love that I cannot tell you, that lives with me now, that gives me courage and soothing and connection and knowledge of who I am and where I'm from and to whom I belong. And it showed me this divine love. And then it showed me Earth. And my vision went down to Earth inside our galaxy, and it was a hologram. And on Earth, were 7 billion people, and I could see all of these 7 billion people simultaneously. There wasn't A to B to C to D. It was all at once, and inside of every single human being, and it was live time for me. So half the world is in darkness, half is in light. I can see the whole thing. I can see every person and what they're doing. There's love making, and there's babies being born, there's wars being murders, and mundane, and everything, shopping, and bugs being squished, and inside of every single human being is this golden fleck of light. And this light is the divine being itself inside of all that there is. And the voice says to me, in the way that I love you now, I have always loved you, was, is, and eternally now. And I love every single human being because I am every single human being. I am the love that animates all there is. I love myself. And in every human being, there was this fog that covered the whole planet. And nobody could see this light inside of anyone else in the way that I could see it, to its purity, to its center of itself. But everybody had it and has it. And I was swept into, I wanted to see up close. And I was swept down to the Atlantic Ocean to a battleship of some kind, and into the presence of a human being who I saw up close, the light inside his chest. And then out I went. And I'm seeing and I'm experiencing this always well-being, this goodness beyond my expression here, the goodness that undergirds and lives inside of all there is, and not just in the physical form, but eternally ever after. And then I see my parents' lives. I see their timelines. I see their parallel timelines. I see their deaths, and it's the same. They're back into the being with the oneness itself, always beloved. And the voice says to me, choose. I say, if I go back to live to alleviate some suffering from my parents' lives so they don't have to lose another kid, can I come back here? And the voice said, yes, you come back here to me, to this love, to this expansive love, to all this love that there is. My lights just, I get in this. Okay, so this is a weird thing that happens to me, that sometimes I get in, as I tell my story, I get into ecstasy, and my lights change. And I don't know. Let me find my device here and turn them
Peter,
down.
I thought it was a big deal in my last video when a butterfly landed on my nose when I mentioned Shams of Tabriz. You just out illuminated that incredibly. This is coming live and unrehearsed and in divine flow. And it is a fantastic touch to a spectacular rendition.
Well, this is the divine energy I'm talking about. So I have lamps. I've got a professional studio. I worked in television, so I got like a setup, and
Right.
I got a little remote here. So, and I just grabbed it and turned the lights down. And um, the divine energy exudes from us when we surrender to it. That's how it works. And so I was given this opportunity. Do I live or do I die? Do I come home? And the voice says, yes, you can come back here. You can choose to go, but it's welcome. It's your time.
Yeah.
Come to me. And you can see that your parents are going to be fine in the end. But I could see their lives and
Yeah.
the suffering they would have. And
Yeah.
I say, if I go back to my life, can I come back here? And the voice says, yes, you come back here to me. I say, well, then I choose my life. And it says to me, you won't live your life, and shoots me out like a pebble off a finger. I love that image. Boom, shoots me out, and I'm enveloped
Pinball.
back inside the angelic being compressed. As I travel, I'm traveling back down, so to speak, and I'm being compressed. And I have no will now. Like, I have no control. I made my choice. This is what's happening. And I'm inside this being getting smaller and small. I'm getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And I can see through the being, because there's this beam of white light that is emanating. And I look back to see where it's coming from. I can't see into the darkness. I can see the darkness edge, but I can't see into it now. But this beam is coming from it. And I follow this beam and as I look at this beam, which is pure light, pure white light, and it's ginormous, and I'm smaller than it, okay? And as I look ahead, it stops at all of these doors. And in the center of all of these doors is this beam that is the largest door, but radiating out from all of these, from this one large beam of light is light that fades as it gets to the edge of like a million doors. And these are the doors that I get to choose from. It tells me, choose light, it says to me. And it wants me to go into the fullness of the light. And I know that it wants that for me, but I don't want that. I want some self. I say to myself, I think this, and so as I think it, so it is. As I think it, I think, how can I be a messenger to to flawed humanity unless I too am flawed? I need to be broken. And I choose a kind of brokenness, but I also choose love, because this light is all I desire. And so I choose these two things simultaneously. And I go through this doorway, and it's illuminated. I'm on the outside, I'm outside the beam, but I'm inside in an intense illumination. But as I go down this tunnel, there are 10,000, a million doors, and all these other doors lead to all these other tunnels. And I go down this one tunnel, and I see all these choices, and I get to the end of this tunnel, and we pop out into this universe, into this world, and I'm still contained inside of this entity. Now I'm like super tiny, and I see my body on the cliff. Now I'm dangling, and I see, because near-death experience is this thing that the more you look at it, the more you see. There's so little that I brought back. I'm always trying to see more.
Mhm.
And so I see my body, and I'm strapped in, and I'm kind of on the kind of dangling a little bit on the edge, and there's him, my climbing partner, and he's standing over me, but now I don't see him because I'm up close. I see this like zooming in, and it's in like over in an instant, and now I'm like right next to the body, and the angelic being pierces pierces my body, and opens me, and it felt like I was being screwed into a too tight space. And I was like squished inside this, and now I'm inside this entity, this physical form, because I don't know what it is. And I can still see through this eye in my heart back into where I can still see the light, and I can still see the darkness, and I see the angelic being who, as I stare at it more and more in my years of looking, it has more a more corporeal form than I've ever seen it in other experiences. But it's still not human, it's still not physical. And then this eye of my heart closes, and I'm imprisoned. And I'm imprisoned in this darkness, and I'm trapped, and I'm exiled, and I'm like, what the F is where? And as my brain comes on, I am racked with pain, because I was in the place of no pain, healing, wholeness, wellness of being, paradise, no suffering, suffering forgotten. And now I'm imprisoned in this casing, and in this casing, I am coming to life, and I begin to hear sounds, and the sounds resolve into language, and the language is screaming and crying, don't die, don't die, don't die, don't die, don't die, don't die. And I open my eyes up, and there's this face, and it goes into shock when it sees my eyes open, and I don't know who he is, and I don't know where I am. I don't know what's going on. I don't know who I am. And he starts, you're alive, you're not dead, you were dead. And he, pulls me up, and it was kind of shaken on me, and I was a new person. And at the end of this, I didn't know who I was anymore. I didn't know anything. I was a blank slate. And then I understood who I was as a person, but I was never just my physical form. And I know that's a lot longer than a thumbnail.
If there is ever a guest who exemplifies the fact that I never tell my guests that's enough, we're out of time, it's you. What you have shared, Peter, is beyond spectacular. The closest I can come to relating to those few initial moments when you re-entered your body and for a moment didn't know who or where or what, or several years ago, many years ago, when I was a lot younger, I had a terrible fever. I was actually in Taiwan, in the Penghu Islands, which is outskirts of Taiwan, way out there, not even on the island of Taiwan. And I had 105-degree fever. And a very dear friend of mine named Melissa literally saved my life by drenching me in cold water and moving me from one bed to the other. And when I regained consciousness in the morning, I literally did not know who I was or what my name was, forget where I was or why I was there. And that was maybe for just 4 or 5 seconds, but that's the closest I can relate to that. And that's what you made me remember. But your account is beyond spectacular. And I just, I don't know what to say. Again, the word fractals, when you're describing all of the universes unfolding from, it seems to me that creation is done fractally. I don't know why it seems like that. Mandelbrot set, all that is what I keep thinking of when I try to envision what it is you're trying to convey, knowing that ultimately it's limited, language limits. But I can't thank you enough. Now, that was your first one, right? So
Yeah, it was my
there,
first one.
there's another one.
I forgot to mention that the divine had no being, no gender, no religion,
Of course not.
only only love.
Of course not.
And in the second one, I we have I have my family has a congenital heart disease issue, and it's killed quite a number of us in our 50s. And I was a vegetarian for 20 years. I was a runner at the time, and now because of my back, I'm a bicyclist. But I was a runner. I ran. This is 2015. Long story short, I was super fit, and I went to a yoga class, and I had a heart attack and self-diagnosed because I had been an ambulance attendant for a period of my life, and I left the studio because I thought, oh, I'm super fit. I'm not going to die from this. And so I didn't want to distract everybody. And I went outside. And after a period of time, the teacher came out and she said, Peter, are you okay? And I said, no, I'm dying. I have a heart attack. And at some point during this was going on, I was like, oh my God, this is getting worse. Today's my birthday. Today I get to die. And I started getting like happy. I was happy about it. And then I thought, oh, yeah, I should probably try to save my own life if I can, because I've got a family. So I should probably see if I can get to the car. And I couldn't get up. And so time goes by and she comes out and, what's going on? I'm having a heart attack. I'm dying. She's like, look at you, Mr. Fit. And I'm like, no. I am, if I don't, yeah, I'm dying. And so I get to the urgent care center. I have 100% blockage in my widowmaker. And now by the time I even get looked at, I'm at the end of the hour. But while I was in the urgent care center, my golden hour ended.
Yeah.
And so I had 100% widowmaker blockage. They gave me a medicine that gave me a maybe 2 or 3% trickle through, and they offered me morphine because I was in a lot of pain. And I said, no morphine. I have a problem. I've had other surgeries. I've given morphine. It's not good for me. And so I was like, no, I won't take that. I'll be vomiting in the back of the ambulance, where I hate being anyway, because I've spent a lot of time in the back of the ambulance. That's not my favorite place, because the diesel smell and the contained area. And I'll be vomiting all over the place. So and I'm going to have a mask on. And anyway, it's like, don't give it to me. What are you going to do? I'm going to meditate. I'm meditating my whole life. And I've learned it's very easy to do. It's not anything special. To look at my pain. And when I look at my pain, I witness my pain. I rise above my pain. And that's been a long practice of mine. And so I was going to meditate by looking at my heart. So off I go. Oh, my son's there. He's in his late 20s and he's mid 20s. And he says, leans in, holds my hand. I read him like he's in shock. He's fearful. He's going to lose his dad. He's not prepared. All this kind of stuff. I'm too young. I don't know what's going on. And he comes in, he squeezes my hand, looks me in the eyes. And he says to me, I love you, Dad. And I'm like, oh, wow, he's not ready. But I can't help it. I'm going. And my wife is next to me and I squeeze her hand and I say, because she knows this about me. I've been praying for my own death for 20 years. And the first chance I get to go, I'm out of here. I'm here's my exit stage left. And I smile at her and she smiles at me and I'm on the gurney and I get in the back of the ambulance and off we go to an hour and a half because it was a Saturday in the summer to the catheterization lab. So I live in a rural place. So to get to the catheterization lab, I got to go through summer traffic in Maine. And I drive that route all the time because it's freaking clergy. So it's an hour and 20 minutes on a good day
Mm.
and where there's no traffic. And so on the way, I'm meditating and the paramedic radios into the because you can hear everything when you're meditating. You're not like my ears don't shut off, right? So I can hear everything that's going on. And she radios in, we're losing him. We're losing him. We're losing him. She's like repeating, we're losing him. We're losing him. And I open my eyes up and she looks down at me and she's got fear on her face because she's responsible for me and she's afraid. But as soon as I look at her, she's like game face on. Boom. She's like super professional because I've been had my eyes closed the whole time. She didn't know I could hear her. So I look at her and I'm like, oh, I'm dying. But as soon as I leave my meditation, the pain comes back in an instant and it's huge. It's like an elephant on my chest, one foot standing on my chest. And so I go back inside myself. And as I go back inside myself, I am not in myself anymore. I am outside of myself in the dark tunnel. And I can see back inside my human body. And I'm not like floating in the ambulance looking at my body. I'm not there. I'm in this dark tunnel. And in this dark tunnel above my body, the same angelic being comes rushing toward me, much smaller this time, same being. It comes down toward me and I can see the darkness. I can see the void. And this comes rushing toward me and it's saying, in the plural, come home to us, come home to us, it's time for you to come home. It's like a poem or a song and it's singing to me and it's come home to us, come home to us. And it's all these entities as one thing. Come to us, come to us, come to us. And it's light and it's energy. I'm like, I'm out of here. And so it comes to me and I like figuratively grab its hand and I've got some sort of physicality. I'm not quite my light body yet. I'm still somehow a little more physical than that. And I start to travel up with it. And then I'm like, well, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. This time I know what's going on and I'm not encased inside it. It hasn't taken me. It's going with me this time. And I'm like, well, hold on a second here. Since I know what's going on, let me take a look around. This was sudden and I don't really ask permission. I say, which kind of gets to choice and will, which is what we were talking about earlier when you asked that question about rejection. And so I turn away and say inside, in this non-language, I'm going to take a look around before I go and see everything's okay. And so I go back inside myself, but I'm not like inhabiting my body. I'm looking and I see my son and I read his depth of his lostness and I see him how hard it's going to be for him without me. I see my daughter, who is older, and her husband went off to Afghanistan and came back an extraordinarily broken man in a very only the way that a war at the very worst can do to a person. And it was it was a bad thing in her life. Leave it at that. But she had a baby, a brand new baby, and we had just extracted her from the marriage and moved her 1,000 miles away for her own safety. And so there she is. And who's going to care for her? And who's going to care for the baby? The baby's less than a year old. And I'm like, I see the baby's life. I see my daughter's life without me. Both my son and my daughter, they're resilient. I see the resilience. But my granddaughter, who's going to be your dad? I have to be there to be this force for her and who's going to protect her? Who's going to protect her from what could come? Only me. And so I turned back to the angelic being, and I kind of, who sees this whole thing, sees it with me. It had receded back up, like politely turned its back, like, I'll give you a little time alone. And it comes rushing back toward me, come, 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 come. Because I also know that in the end, all's gonna be well. But I say, if it's all the same to you, I'll just finish out this life and come back when it's finished. And I turn around and I go back in. And I woke up, got surgery, and the next day, and I kept my first one a secret for 20 years. And the next day, I wake up in my own room. I wake up in the ICU, and then the cardiac care, and then they move me into my own room like first thing in the morning, and all these people are in my room. My wife and my son and my daughter and friends from Portland, because I'm at this point, I'm a TV star in Portland, Maine. I'm at the local news station, and I have a 2-minute program every single morning to bring hope and inspiration to the daily news audience. But I work for a non-sectarian 501c3 that's embedded inside of this. Anyway, so I'm like, there's a whole bunch of people in the room, and I wake up and I tell them I died, and my wife says to me, I was already making plans, which she was. She was like, first chance he gets, he's out of here. So she's like, I'm really super surprised. She said this with love, okay? But with truthfulness. I'm me too. And then it turns out that my son, who was there, said to me that the doctor told them all to say goodbye to me, my wife and my son, because I was going to die. I was outside the golden hour. I had massive I've had massive damage. I've had damage in my heart muscle as a result of this. And so I function at about, my heart functions at maybe, I'm going to guess, between 70 and 75% of what it used to. And anyway, after this near-death experience, I'm all in. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing now. The TV program that I was on had aired for 91 years, started on radio. I was the 5th guy at this 501c3. It was an institution in the state, broadcasted into Canada, New Hampshire, Armed Forces Radio, all this stuff, and working in New York with major networks and things. And the program ended. I was in my hospital bed, and the TV station called and said, "New corporation, we're going to end your program." And but I was all in. Every single mystical experience that a person has, and maybe this is a good place to end this time because I got to get going. It's been great, but I should probably go. And every mystical experience of any kind shatters a portion of yourself, and it leaves you a new person. You become born again. After your friend died and she came to you, you had a born again experience where you now know noetically wisdom, an understanding that you can't express, that reorients you towards a new way of being. Yeah. And that's what happened to me every time. And now I am more integrated now than I spent my life trying to reintegrate back here. And now I'm much more integrated than I ever was before. And I know I'm finally embracing my mission. I've always, as a minister, working with the homeless, working in the food kitchen, the soup kitchens and the homeless shelters and the food pantries, and with the grieving and the dying and social services and all this stuff, has always been about this singular mission, but I always kept it a secret. I never told people why I was behaving and doing the things I was doing. And now I'm out there trying to get other near-death experiences and other mystical experiences to speak their experience to somebody. Because the more this enters into the public square, the more it becomes normalized, the more chance we have as humanity to nudge us in a new direction.
Well, Peter, there's no way that I can express adequately the gratitude and appreciation and respect that I have for you for sharing all that you have shared here today. I'm going to get some links from you for our viewers where they can find your publications and how they can find out more about you for those that are interested, and they will be there, possibly even more than the regular 3 or 4 wonderfully beautiful viewers that comment. You might even get a few new ones from this. This has been an absolutely spectacular conversation, and I definitely want you to come back, and I hope that you will. And there's so much more that we can share, but you have shared so freely and so prolifically that there's no way I can thank you enough. And as far as the timing of this, I'm going to invite several family members to view this when they are able. And I already know, without a doubt, it will help all of us in our processing of the mourning and grief that we experience in the transitioning of a very, very beloved aunt, mother, sister, cousin, friend, everything. Uh, you you have come here at a very prescient time, in that sense, auspicious, and I appreciate it. Um, Thank you so much. Let us know where to reach you, and of course, I will put these links in the description. But let us know where to reach you for your books and to find out more about you.
Everything goes through peterpanagore.love.
Uh-huh.
If all links lead to from there.
And Peter's books are Heaven is Beautiful and 2 Minutes for God. And also he has contributed a story, a true story, in the Chicken Soup for the Veteran's Soul, in case anyone wants to pick up a copy of that. Again, links in description. And Peter, thank you. And I call you brother.
I call you brother.
Yeah, you are easy to love.
And YouTube. Find me on YouTube. That's my main location. My website leads to YouTube.
Okay, I'll
And I
put
call
all
you
the links
right.
faithfully
Thank
in the
you.
description.
I call you brother too.
I recognize you as brother. Thank you so much, Peter, on behalf of all of our viewers and especially my family members that will be watching this particular video of our conversation. Be blessed, and thank you for being the blessing. We are enjoying the very sweet fruits of your chosen returns. Thank you.
I work for the master.